Well, it's New Year's Day and I'm in Anglesey, North Wales, and I'm actually staying in a beautiful cottage, which is where a chap called Cyffin Williams used to live. And it's this white building behind me. And he is probably Wales's most famous artist. 20th century, painted beautiful oil landscapes and portraits. I think probably my favourite work by him are his portraits and his pen and ink studies, which are really, really beautiful. This building behind me up here, this is his, this was his studio. Gorgeous little building. He had a fantastic view out of the window, so he used to work up the top, I think, mainly. And then the view from his window is this here. So we've got the Britannia Bridge back there. That's the Menai Strait. It's quite calm now. It was absolutely blowing it last night. Huge waves out there. Someone on a paddleboard out there today. They would not have been able to do that last night. Anyway, while I'm staying here in his house, I thought I would try and do a few drawings in his style. One of the projects I want to do next year is a 6-page comic. And rather than do that traditionally on paper, I'm going to use Procreate, which is a digital drawing app on the iPad. And I thought while I'm away, getting to know Procreate would be a good thing to do. And as I'm staying in Cyffin's house, I figured I will try and do a few drawings, sketches in his various styles. His portraits, landscapes, and pen and ink work are quite different, I think. I'm not that keen on the landscapes. I find the oil paints just a bit too heavily applied for my taste. It's still heavily applied on the portraits, but I don't know, there's something about them. I find them quite contemporary still, even though they were done, I suppose the bulk of his work was probably 50 years ago, something like that. But the pen and ink studies I really, really like, and I think the portraits are great as well. So yeah, I'm going to play with Procreate on the iPad and just have a bit of an experiment, see what some of the brushes are like in there, some of the different effects I can do, and hopefully that will be useful information for when I start on the comic, which will probably, well, might not be the next video you see, but the one after that maybe. Depends whether I try and divide up the process into separate bits or whether I wait until I've done the whole thing and then show it to you all at once. Anyway, I'm going to enjoy my walk while the sun's out, and later I'll get inside and actually start doing some sketching, and we can see what Procreate does and what Cyffin Williams' artwork actually looks like. So the first piece I'm going to have an attempt at is copying one of Cyffin's pen and ink drawings. So it's a lovely little typical Welsh building nestled amongst the hills. I found doing this one that the ink brush in Procreate was brilliant. That really gave me a nice feeling of a sort of ink brush with the various weights of ink coming out. That worked really, really well. Watercolour brush I wasn't quite so keen on. It didn't really feel like using watercolour in real life. If you're a Procreate user and you've got any recommendations for watercolour brushes or oil brushes or anything else really, I know there's millions and millions out there. Leave them in the comments if you've got one that you particularly like, and I'll give them a go. Next, I'm going to move on to doing a portrait. For this one, I looked at a couple of Cyffin's portraits, took the sort of quite muted palette, kind of worked with his colours. The strokes of the oil paint are different in Procreate. It's sort of simulating light hitting an actual piece of oil on a canvas. So it's sort of an odd effect. It works quite well at first glance. It looks like an oil painting stroke, but it obviously doesn't have the same three-dimensionality, so when you move in front of an oil painting, the light changes over the surface. in Procreate this is faked from one direction. It gives you a pretty good effect, I'd have to say, but it's a very different beast. Oil painting is probably my favourite medium to work with. People often think it's hard. They think that watercolour is the kind of thing to do as an amateur. If you're sat in your kitchen table, it's easy to do a watercolour, but actually watercolour is the hardest medium to work with because it's unforgiving. Oil paint is the easiest, because if it doesn't work, you can just scrape it off and put another bit on. This has come out pretty well. It's nice and blocky. I do like his portrait pictures. There's definitely a similarity between the bold way in which he uses the colours to someone like Lucian Freud, most famously. The brushstrokes go on nice and thickly. It's one of those things that when a master is doing it properly, it looks effortless, it looks magical. It sort of goes back to the Rembrandt style of painting, actually. If you look at his pictures from a distance, they are incredible. The light is amazing, the technique is just superb. You get close to them and the paint is applied in a way that you would not believe comes together from a distance. And I think people like Freud and Cuffin Williams have some of that in their portrait work. It's really, really beautiful. It's sort of proper, I'm going to say proper painting. I know some people would disagree with that, but if you're a painter, it's real gutsy paint going on. It's really beautiful to look at and see how they do just wonderful stuff. I'm just sort of faking the background here just to make it look a bit like it does in one of the original pictures. Again, Procreate is great at giving you a sort of brush stroke effect. But of all the pictures I've done here, I think this is the one I would have been more happy doing for real on canvas with real oil paint. It would have been easier. I think I could have made a better job of it. But that's because I need to work with Procreate. It's an amazing piece of software. I thoroughly recommend it to anyone. If you haven't tried it before and you've got an iPad, get yourself a copy. For the final landscape, I thought I would head over to Llanberis, which is a beautiful, beautiful place at the foot of Snowdon, and I would take some inspiration over the lake and see if I can put together something that looks a bit like one of Cuffin's landscape pictures. In hindsight, having started this piece, I think I actually took too much landscape. I've got too wide a view. Flicking through some of the books that are here in his house about his work, he's often much tighter into one particular mountain. I think there are too many details in this picture that I'm trying to paint. But it's still good for playing with his work and having a go at trying to create something that's similar. Again, with the brushes in Procreate, I'm finding I've got to work with the brush and the way it applies the paint in order to build up a finished effect. Whereas if I was using real oil paint, I think I would find it easier to paint this in Cuffin's style. But this is a great exercise. I'm really glad I decided to do this while I'm away on holiday, because it's getting me much more used to the tricks that you can do in Procreate and the workflow that you need to have, and it's a really fabulous piece of software. So again, I highly recommend it. And the piece is coming together now. I'm enjoying using a palette similar to Cuffin's. I think I've probably pushed the blue greys in this a bit further than he would. He would probably just have a tiny bit of it, tiny spot in the sky and a tiny spot on the lake. But you know, it's my picture as well. It's very difficult actually when I'm working to try and turn off the way I paint and just remember to do it the way that Cuffin paints. That, I think, is something I'll have a go at again in the future and see if I can paint in the style of other artists. But it's definitely being more disciplined and working more with the way they do things rather than the way my brain is telling me to go and do it. It's definitely something I'm going to have to work at a bit harder. But all in all, I think this has been an excellent experiment. I've enjoyed doing all three of these pieces. I hope you've enjoyed watching, and you know, if there are any other artists you'd like to see me having a go at painting in the style of, put it in the comments below. If you've enjoyed watching me create these three pieces, which one was your favourite? For me, it was the portrait, but maybe you like some of the other ones. I hope you've enjoyed watching me having a go at painting in the style of Cuffin Williams. If you have, please hit subscribe and like and leave a little comment. And don't forget, enjoy your art journey in 2025.